Hi everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. On today's episode, we finish the Summer of Zon and wrap up the New Republic era of Star Wars Legends. Luke and Mara are invited by the Chiss on a salvage mission to help recover a relic of the Republic that was destroyed 50 years ago by Grand Admiral Thrawn. The two Jedi hope the mission will open up diplomatic talks between the New Republic and the Chiss, but they soon discover that nothing about this salvage operation is actually what it seems. It's Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn, and I'll talk more about the book coming up in a few minutes. But first, let's read a listener email. Today's question comes from frequent emailer Sable, who says, "Hello again, Aaron. Here's a stay-up-all-night question. What if Darth Vader didn't die at the end of Return of the Jedi? How would everyone react? How would Vader's injuries affect him going forward? And how would the story fit into Legends?" Thank you very much for the email, Sable. I answered a question similar to this one a few years ago on the podcast about what role Anakin would have had in the story moving forward if he had lived beyond Return of the Jedi. I think he would need to stay incarcerated for the rest of his life. I believe that the citizens of the galaxy that were oppressed and terrorized by the Empire, the politicians of the New Republic, and everyone in between that was somehow affected by Vader and the Empire would be adamant that Anakin pay for his actions as Darth Vader. I'm sure many would call for his execution, but that doesn't seem to be a thing under the New Republic in the galaxy far, far away. So, I think he would be sentenced to life in prison. I don't think that would be the end of his story, though. I think Luke would regularly ask his father about the history of the Jedi Order. What things did the Order get right? Where did it fail? I think Luke would want to have some sort of relationship with Anakin. I'm sure he would ask him questions about Shmi, about his childhood on Tatooine, and, of course, Padme. So that's how I would want his story to continue forward in Legends, as someone who could advise Luke in a similar way that Obi-Wan did. On the other hand, I don't know how much of a relationship Leia would want to have with her father. I don't know if she would ever want to even talk to him. I mean, how long do you think it would take for Leia to get past the anger she must feel over the deaths of her parents and the destruction of her homeworld in order to even be in the same room as Anakin? That's the biggest question for me. Would Leia ever get to a point where she would want to have a conversation with her father? As to the other part of your question, Sable, I think wherever the New Republic locks Anakin up, they'd have to supply some sort of medical suit or chamber that would allow him to survive. It might even require some sort of mask or helmet, but hopefully at some point, the New Republic doctors would be able to develop a way for Anakin to survive without having something covering his face. Thanks again for the email, Sable. Listener, if you have a question for the show, send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, you can record a short message and email it in, but please record it in MP3 audio format. Now it's time for today's book, Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn, the final book in the New Republic era of Star Wars Legends. Grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. The story begins with Luke and Mara meeting with Talon Karrde. The former smuggling chief has a message for the Jedi. a transmission from Admiral Park on Nirwan. A few years ago, Park and Baron Sunterfell asked Mara to join them to help the Chiss guard against the dangers lurking in the unknown regions of the galaxy. Card says Park has another invitation, this time for both Luke and Mara. The Chiss have found the wreckage of Outbound Flight, a joint Republic-Jedi expedition 50 years ago that set out to explore the unknown regions and travel beyond the edge of the galaxy. Card says the message was originally transmitted a week ago, but it was stolen by one of his employees, a man named Dean Gensler. Luke hopes the wreckage of Outbound Flight could contain information about the old Jedi Order. He and Mara thank Card for the information and head out to Nirwan. When they arrive, the Jedi are welcomed by an aristocrat of the 9 ruling Chiss families. Aristocrat Formby says Outbound Flight was destroyed by Thrawn 50 years ago, and the Chiss wish to return the wreckage to the Jedi. But Luke and Mara aren't the only ones joining the expedition. There's a squad of 4 stormtroopers from the 501st Legion, led by Commander Chak Fell, who says they're representing the Empire of the Hand. There's a transport of aliens called the Jaroon, who claim they owe their freedom to the Jedi on Outbound Flight. And there's a New Republic ambassador, Dean Gensler. The group boards the Chaff Envoy, and Aristocrat Formby says the trip to Outbound Flight will take a few days. He offers Luke, Mara, and Ambassador Gensler rooms on his flagship, while the Stormtroopers and the Jaroon opt to stay on their own vessels, which are docked inside the hangar bay. When Luke and Mara get a chance, they confront Gensler. They know he isn't an ambassador. He's lying. And to his credit, Gensler does not deny it. He says his older sister, Lorana, was a Jedi on Outbound Flight. Gensler says his parents always talked about his sister when he was growing up. They were so proud of her, and Gensler resented her for the way his parents looked at him, like he was some sort of disappointment. Gensler says he only spoke to his sister once. He was angry, and that conversation did not go well. Gensler says he heard the transmission from Admiral Park while he was working at a relay satellite. He tells the Jedi that he's sorry for stealing the message and lying to the Chiss, but he just needs to see what happened to Lorana. Through the Force, Luke and Mara feel that Gensler is telling the truth about his sister. They decide not to tell Aristocrat Formby, but they tell Gensler that once they all return to New Republic space, he's going to face some sort of discipline from Talon Card. Once the expedition begins, weird things start happening. There's an alarm in the ship's engine room. Someone steals a manual from the Imperials. And Mara has this nagging feeling that Formby is hiding something. Regardless, they eventually reach Chiss space and a dense cluster of stars called the Redoubt. Formby says Thrawn chased Outbound Flight into the Redoubt, where he shot it down above a small, stony planetoid. Now, when the expedition reaches this planetoid, they find the wreckage, and it's in pretty good shape, all things considered. The Outbound Flight vessel featured 6 Old Republic dreadnoughts surrounding a huge central fuselage core. From what they can see, it looks like the vessel crash-landed in some sort of valley that was filled with gravel. The dreadnought that ended up on the bottom when it crashed was mostly flattened, but the damage to the other 5 dreadnoughts and the central core doesn't look that bad. Formby invites Luke, Mara, Gensler, the Imperials, and a small group of the Jaroon to join the Chiss landing team. They head down and dock with the dreadnought on top of the wreckage, which turns out to be D4, meaning D1 is the dreadnought smashed underneath the vessel. The group starts discussing how they're going to start searching the vessel when Mara senses something shocking. There are humans alive on outbound flight. Almost immediately, the outbound flight survivors spring a trap. They bring Aristocrat Formby, his Chiss attendants, Ambassador Gensler, and the Jeroen in the landing party in front of their ruling council, led by a man named Chas Uliar. Uliar is one of the 57 survivors of the crash 50 years ago. Now the colony numbers a little more than 100, and Uliar wants to be able to take his people to a habitable world, unless, that is, the Chiss and the Jedi have returned to finish them off. In fact, the survivors have repaired D5, and they wish to continue their voyage. Formby tells Uliar that the Chiss didn't even know about outbound flight until a few weeks ago. They believed that Thrawn had completely destroyed it. He says that now they know there are survivors, his people are free to return to the Republic with Gensler and the Jedi. But Formby is adamant they cannot stay in Chiss space. Elsewhere, Luke, Mara, Commander Fel, and the stormtroopers escape from where they are being held. They figure out that they're near the central core, while Formby, Gensler, and the others have been taken back to D4. Access to D4 has been cut off, so the groups split up. Luke and Mara check out D1 to try and figure out why the lead dreadnought ended up underneath the vessel when it crashed. They make their way to the bridge, but of course, everything there is destroyed. However, Luke does find something: a lightsaber. Now meanwhile, Commander Fel and the stormtroopers head over to D3. There, they find what appears to be a makeshift prison. Inside, there's a pair of women and 2 young children. The appearance of the stormtroopers frightens the women, but Fel says they mean them no harm. He asks the women what they did to deserve prison time. "Nothing," says the older woman, and then she points at the toddlers. They're the dangerous ones. Back in the meeting room, Formby and Uliar continue their debate when, strangely, the Jeroen contingent begins laughing. Or should I say, the Vagari, a race of bloodthirsty nomads and slavers who range throughout the unknown regions. The Vagari kill Formby's bodyguards. They wound the Aristocrat and trap everyone in the corner of the room. But Gensler is able to grab a comlink from one of the dead Chiss, and when the Vagari head off to search for others, he calls Luke, Mara, and the Imperials to warn them. Our heroes make their way to D4 as quickly as possible, fighting through dozens of Vagari. It turns out the Jeroen transport is actually a Vagari warship, and they hid their numbers from Chiss scanners by putting most of their warriors in a state of suspended animation. Now those warriors are awake, and they overwhelm the Chiss, who remained on the Chaff Envoy. The Vagari disable the Chiss ship and prepare D5 to launch. Luke, Mara, and the Imperials eventually make their way to D4 and rescue Formby, Gensler, and the outbound flight ruling council. But before they can reach D5, the Vagari launch the dreadnought and head back to the entrance of the redoubt. Luckily, the survivors show Luke and Mara an old Delta 12 Sky Sprite that a pair of Jedi abandoned on outbound flight shortly after the voyage began. Miraculously, it still flies, and it's faster than a dreadnought. The Jedi hop in the Sky Sprite and head off to try and catch the Vagari before they leave the redoubt and attack more of the Chiss. Luke and Mara intercept the dreadnought at the entrance to the redoubt and sneak aboard. The Jedi head toward the bridge, fighting their way through Vagari soldiers. But just before they reach their destination, Mara hears a familiar noise. It sounds like something rolling through the corridors, and it's getting closer. It's a droideka, the bane of the Jedi during the Clone Wars. The droideka runs Luke and Mara off from the bridge, but the Jedi notice that after they reach a certain distance away, the droid stops and returns to its station in front of the bridge entrance. So how will they get around it? Well, leave that to Mara. She waits until the droideka returns to its post and then jumps out to get its attention. When the droid turns, Mara starts to run. The droideka rolls down the hall after her until it gets to the spot where it stops, a spot the Jedi noticed a little bit earlier. The droideka opens up and starts firing at Mara, but it doesn't notice the small cylindrical object that had been placed on the floor at its feet. It's Lorana Gensler's old lightsaber, and it's sitting inside the droideka's force field. Luke pokes his head out from a side room and uses the force to ignite Lorana's lightsaber. He turns it straight up and through the droideka, destroying it. With the path to the bridge clear, Luke and Mara charge into the command deck, taking control of the dreadnought and helping the Chiss mop up the Vagari. The story ends with Formby and the Chiss evacuating the outbound flight survivors from the redoubt. But the former colonists still don't trust the Republic, and many of the older survivors resent the Jedi. Commander Fel offers to help them find a suitable place to live in the Empire of the Hand. The ordeal leaves Luke frustrated that he and Mara didn't find any new information about the old Jedi Order, but he is hopeful that it's been a first step in opening up relations with the Chiss ascendancy. Time to take a break. When I return, I'll talk more about Survivor's Quest. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Hey everyone, would you like to hang out with other Legends fans? Well, listen up. This year's Legacy Expo is coming up September 13th and 14th in Burbank, California. The Legacy Expo is a fan-run convention celebrating the books, comics, games, and all the other media from the Star Wars Expanded Universe. The Legacy Expo is an all-inclusive event for EU fans, young and old, and will feature vendors, artists, authors, and special guests. This year, the expo welcomes James Lucino, Barbara Hambly, Stephen Barnes, Abel Pena, and many more. So, check out the Legacy Expo at the Marriott Convention Center in Burbank, California on September 13th and 14th. Tickets are on sale now at legacyexpo.org. All proceeds from the Legacy Expo will be donated to the Book Truck, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that provides books, graphic novels, and other reading materials to underserved and at-risk youth in the Los Angeles area. For more information, check out the event's website or email the event at hellothere@legacyexpo.com. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me take a moment and recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Thrawn Treason focuses on the future Grand Admiral learning to navigate the politics of the Imperial military. But when Eli Vanto brings him a warning from the unknown regions, Thrawn must decide whether to return to the Chiss ascendancy or remain loyal to the Emperor. It's Thrawn Treason by Timothy Zahn. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. Today, I'm talking about the book Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn, the final book in the New Republic era of Star Wars Legends. I really enjoy this book. I think it's a fitting end to the New Republic era on the timeline. Now, as I was putting together this episode, I decided to do a little research on Wikipedia about Survivor's Quest. I usually do this for all the books that I talk about here on the show, mostly to look at the sections about background and continuity. This book was published as a companion piece to the Outbound Flight novel. Well, that makes a lot of sense. You get the story of Outbound Flight about what happened 50 years ago between Grand Admiral Thrawn, the Jedi Master, Joruus C'baoth, and his Padawan, Lorana Jensler, and when they ran into the Vagari. The funny part is, when I did the episode about Outbound Flight way back in season 1 of the podcast, I had completely forgot about Survivor's Quest. I should have either did Survivor's Quest back in season 1, or I should have waited until this season to do Outbound Flight. And there are some cool continuity things between the two books. In Outbound Flight, we have the argument between Dean Jensler and his older sister Lorana. We also have the Delta 12 Sky Sprite. In Outbound Flight, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker that meet up with Outbound Flight, land there. However, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine shows up, and at the behest of Palpatine, before the Outbound Flight venture leaves Republic space, he basically orders Obi-Wan and Anakin to come back with him. Well, he brings them back in his shuttle, leaving the Delta 12 Sky Sprite with Outbound Flight. So, the ship that Luke and Mara use to catch up to the Vagari at the end of Survivor's Quest is the same Delta 12 Sky Sprite that Obi-Wan and Anakin left on Outbound Flight 50 years ago. I don't know if it would have been interesting to have Luke get a feeling about the ship that his father flew to meet up with Outbound Flight all those years ago. You don't really need it if you've read both books and you make the connection. But I don't know. I think I would have liked Luke to have just some sort of strange little feeling. Him not knowing exactly why he feels that way. Maybe he's drawn to the little ship. But it's not really necessary. Of course, the main connecting tissue between Outbound Flight and Survivor's Quest are the survivors of the crash on this little planetoid. Outbound Flight had left with hundreds, but only 57 survived to the point where the Chiss rediscover the wreckage and where the events of Survivor's Quest takes place. The older survivors remember Jedi Master Joruus C'baoth, and they remember Jedi Lorana Jensler. In Outbound Flight, C'baoth is a tremendous jerk. He orders the non-Force users around. He talks about any children born during Outbound Flight who show any talent with the Force of just taking them. The parents don't get any say whatsoever. And he exacerbates the confrontation with Thrawn when Outbound Flight reaches the Chiss ascendancy, and basically just makes it a horrible trip for these people. Now, because Lorana Jensler is his apprentice, the survivors also have a bad opinion of her. Little do they know that Laurana and another member of one of the Chiss ruling families and a relative of Grand Admiral Thrawn, a Chiss named Thras, saved them. They were in Dreadnought number 4 when it was about to crash. Dreadnought number 4 was normally on the bottom of the vessel when it's flying because it was the one opposite Dreadnought number 1. D1 was the command Dreadnought. Well, Laurana and Thras took control of D1 as it was crashing and basically flipped the entire vessel so that D1 was on the bottom where only they were in, only those two, and the colonists that were on D4 were now at the top. There is a mention in the previous book that Laurana Jensler drops her lightsaber as she prepares to take control of the ship. And of course, in Survivor's Quest, when Luke and Mara head to D1 to explore the command deck, Luke finds Laurana Jensler's lightsaber. These little pieces of continuity are pretty cool. One of the interesting parts of this book for me is that Mara eventually figures out that Formby knows that the Jaroon are not the Jaroon. Somehow, Formby figured out that the Vagari were masquerading as the Jaroon. He accepted the Jaroon for this mission because Chiss law states that they cannot be the aggressor in a fight. They can only retaliate. The opponent must make the first move. Formby invites the Jaroon, actually the Vagari, along, hoping that once they reach outbound flight, the Vagari attack. He invited Luke and Mara along as a secret weapon, knowing that the Vagari have no experience with Jedi. The aliens have never seen a Jedi. They don't really know anything about them. And he's hoping that the Jedi will be a wild card if and when the Vagari attack. Mara figures this out. It takes a while. It's not until after the Vagari reveal themselves and Formby is wounded, his bodyguards are killed, and the Vagari attack and disable the Chaff envoy, but eventually Mara figures that out. I think that's some of Zahn's best writing in this specific story. The reader can tell that a mystery is happening. I like trying to solve a mystery along with the characters in the book. I don't like that mystery to be too easy, to where I can figure it out early. And I remember the first time reading this book, I could not tell that the Jaroon were actually the Vagari in disguise. And I couldn't figure out that Formby actually manipulated the entire situation. But Mara, a character in the book, figures it out, and when she lays out the explanation to Luke, all of the tiny little coincidences, clues, fit together. It's my favorite part of this story. I think Survivor's Quest does a pretty good job of wrapping up the events of the Legends timeline following the events of Return of the Jedi, roughly 18 years earlier. Luke is a Jedi Master. His Jedi Academy is up and running on Yavin 4. He's producing Jedi who will be going out to help in the galaxy. And as we'll see going forward, there will be a new generation of Jedi. And Mara has finally come to terms completely with her role in the Empire, her ability to change, to see the evil of the Empire and decide to be a better person. It's taken a while for her to accept her past and what her role is in the future of the galaxy. But following the events of the Hand of Thrawn duology that we just covered here on the show, and now Survivor's Quest, Mara is now at peace with where she is. For the most part, the members of the New Republic that know Mara are at peace with having Mara as a Jedi helping the galaxy, helping the New Republic, and helping to train the next generation of Jedi. I know that occasionally I give Mara a little bit of flack. I like the character. I would have liked to see her pay some sort of restitution for what she did working for the Emperor. However, Mara's story in Legends is one of the best examples of someone rehabilitating themselves in all of Star Wars, canon or Legends. We had the question earlier in today's episode about what if Vader's story would have continued? What if Anakin's story would have continued and he had not died at the end of Return of the Jedi? At the end of the sequel trilogy, Ben Solo dies. I have a difficult time calling their turns at the end a redemption because we never see them work at trying to redeem themselves, at trying to do good in the galaxy, to, as I said, pay restitution for the crimes, the evil that they have committed. But we do see that to some degree with Mara's story through the New Republic era of Legends. She helps Luke defeat the clone of Jorus Sabayoth. She helps the New Republic defeat Grand Admiral Thrawn. She helps form the Smugglers Alliance in order to assist the New Republic with moving cargo throughout the galaxy. She helps Card set up his intelligence operation, which supplies information to the New Republic. She helped defeat the Human League during the Corellian Crisis and helped Leia escape from prison at that time. Now, we have not gone over the Corellian Crisis here on the podcast. That'll be coming up next year. But she helped them there. She obviously helped during the Hand of Thrawn duology with the Kayamasi document. So while Mara may not be one of my favorite characters in Legends, I like her a lot, but I wouldn't say she's one of my favorites. I will say her story, working at redemption, working to be a better person, is one of the triumphs of the old expanded universe. Hopefully we see more of these types of stories going forward in canon. Maybe we will. I do think on some level we have. I think that Grief Karga's story in The Mandalorian is a bit of a story of redemption. I think Din Djarin's story is a little bit of a story of redemption. But I want to see a redemption story of a dark side Force user. Hopefully, we get one of those stories someday in canon. Well, it's about time to go. Listener, if you have something you'd like to share with me, a question, an opinion, or a comment, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And don't forget to send in your favorite Star Wars character groupings. Which characters would make up your ideal Starfighter squadron? What characters would make up your favorite road trip crew? Who's on your Star Wars Mount Rushmore? What Star Wars character would make the greatest mixtape? And what songs will be on that mixtape? Let me know. I really enjoy reading the groups that you listeners send in. Now, coming up on the next episode, we jump ahead 18 years on the timeline as I begin the Legacy of the Force series. Book 1 is Betrayal by Aaron Alston. Join me for that episode coming out on August 22nd. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in Legends.